We start with Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. Congresswoman Dingle has been the United States Representative for Michigan's 12th Congressional District since 2015. She is a strong supporter and advocate for the automotive industry and automation, and she's become a driving force for regulation and encouragement for the industry at large. Before being elected to Congress, Debbie was the chair of the Wayne State University Board of Governors. She is an active civic and community leader and has been recognized as a national advocate for women and children. For more than 30 years, Debbie served one of Michigan's largest employers, the General Motors Corporation, where she was president of the GM Foundation and a senior executive responsible for public affairs. Welcome, Congresswoman Debbie Dingle.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Congresswoman.
Okay, I apologize. I was desperately trying to get my background up and I couldn't.
No problem at all. We're happy to have
apologize.
you. Thank you so much.
Okay, and I want to make sure my, it's technology from where we all are is not the easiest, but that's what we're also sort of talking about. So
Exactly. And I will turn it over to you then.
thank you, Selika, for that kind introduction. And I wish I had the right background, so I apologize to everybody, but it's really, it's great to be with all of you. I think more than almost any other audience, you will probably understand that I need to keep my remarks brief so I can jump back into a committee hearing that we are having with Facebook, Twitter, and Google this afternoon. But I want to share a few thoughts before I do. We know that the autonomous vehicle revolution is coming, and it's going to bring immense challenges and many opportunities. We have the opportunity to reduce the 38,000 fatalities that we have on our roads each year and provide new mobility services to senior citizens and people with disabilities. AVs could potentially reduce emissions and improve congestion on our roads as well, but only if we get the policies right. Look, passing laws in Washington is never as easy as it should be, even when there's a clear demonstrated need like it is in this case. We took a big step forward with the passage of the Self-Drive Act through the House of Representatives in September 2017. We still haven't gotten the job done. I'm really proud of the fact that we passed it unanimously in the House, but then it stalled and we didn't do anything in the last Congress, and it's really not okay. We have to get something done. And we got to get the job done. And I have been shouting that from rooftops to my colleagues of late. That legislation continues to be a model for how Congress should act. But we know that the world has changed since that time, and we have to do more tweaks. And if we don't act, others will, both domestic and internationally. We have already begun the process and are having productive conversations on renewed EV legislation, but I keep pushing. As we pivot from relief to recovery, we really need to look at this as a bold opportunity to advance major long-term infrastructure priorities. At home in Michigan, we have a very good state law regarding AV testing and deployment that's really a model for the rest of the nation. But states and localities are starting to go in many different directions in terms of setting their own AV laws and policies. And I'll be blunt, we cannot have a patchwork of state laws regulating how AVs are designed and constructed. We have to have a federal framework for the deployment and development of vehicles that also respects the traditional regulatory roles. As I said earlier, the autonomous vehicle revolution promises to transform our world in ways we cannot imagine, but only if we get the policies right. This is a great example of why we need to pass strong AV legislation that puts safety first. We need to give NHTSA the tools they need to ensure the safety of autonomous driving systems. We need to engage with automakers, labor leaders, and safety advocates to safely get AVs on the roads built in American factories at a price consumers can afford. But lifting up this new industry also gives us an opportunity to change the way we approach its workforce. We can dispel with old stereotypes and stigmas, ensure women are an integral part of the workforce, and implement proactive policies that protect women and families. If you don't already know this, I'm a car girl. I refuse to accept the idea that this industry cannot be dominated by women. Creating and building AVs is our opportunity to seize our rightful place at the forefront of the auto industry, and I'll do everything I can to make it our reality. And we do have to push on this because, quite frankly, other countries are doing it. And if we don't get ourselves out there, we're going to be behind in technology, and we can't let that happen. With that, I'd love to take a few questions before I head back to what's going to be a very interesting hearing this afternoon.
Thank you, Congresswoman Dingle. We appreciate those remarks. I do have a few questions for you. You discussed the role of the US and government in particular concerning AV technology, and you've clearly championed legislation in that regard. The question for you is, should the government response be a whole of government approach or specifically just for the Department of Transportation?
I think it needs to be a whole of government approach because there will be, DOT needs to take the lead as the natural lead. But, you know, when we talk about whole of government, that another problem is that manufacturers need certainty. They can't have 50 sets of different regulations either. So DOT needs to take the lead, but in other ways that people are impacted by all of this, we need to make sure we're including all of the agencies. The FCC is an example of, in terms of not broadband, but the frequencies that we need to use. So it needs to be a whole of government approach.
Thank you. The next point is jobs, jobs, and jobs. Coming out of COVID-19, now more than ever, we realize, frankly, how fragile the job market and the economy can be. How do you see the advent of AV technology impacting the automotive job sector?
Well, we need to make sure that we're going to be in this market. So AVs are going to be part of the future. There, you know, lots of different people are looking at them. And quite frankly, we are behind in the US. We have not passed the laws that we need to make. So we're competing with other countries. And I've talked to my leadership about this. I've talked to the new White House about this. But if we want to be at the forefront, which will create jobs, you know, autonomous vehicles are part of the future technology. We don't want those jobs in China or India or in another country. We want them here, which means we've got to do what we've got to do to set up the framework to have this technology here in this country and to be creating those jobs here. I mean, just in general, I want to tell you, we need to worry about keeping jobs in the US. The COVID-19 that you talked about at the beginning of this shined a light on the fact that we have shipped jobs overseas. When we look at PPE equipment and what we were doing and how it was all being built in China. We need to bring supply chains back to this country. We need to bring manufacturing back to this country. And we're talking about autonomous vehicles here today, that as we talk about electric vehicles, here's a reality. The internal combustion engine has more jobs. As we convert to these new technologies, autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, we need those jobs here in this good paying jobs here, employing Americans. And that is one of the most, I want them to be good paying union jobs, to tell you the truth. So we got to make sure we keep those jobs here in the United States.
That's critical. Thank you for that. I'm a professor at American University, and in the classes that I teach and my research, a large component revolves around equity in transportation. I often say transportation is mobility and mobility is freedom. What responsibility do you believe government has towards supporting the future of equity in transportation and the ways in which the mobility industry can open up this concept of freedom for all?
Well, you know, mobility is freedom. And I think the equity that you're talking about is very important. So I think the government has a really critical role to play, especially for the disabled and the elderly. And we've got to help build confidence. My late husband, who I loved with my whole heart and soul, deeply resented his loss of mobility and my not letting him drive. And he, by the way, was very nervous about autonomous vehicles. We need to help both the disabled and the elderly understand that autonomous vehicles are a way that they will have that mobility. They will have that freedom. They shouldn't be afraid of the technology, but we need to make sure that they have access to it and how they can use it, and that they can have confidence that it is safe for them to use.
Thank you. I can say you've been a staunch supporter of innovation and technology. We know that in the next state, in this future of automation, that we should be in a better position. Can you give us some thoughts about how you see women playing a role with these new technologies?
Well, I look forward to the day that we're not looking at things as being women or men, but people are being just the skill set that they bring. Now, I will say, and I'm being very blunt, I think we need more women in the auto industry because we're more than half the drivers and we're the customers. And we also, when you talk about autonomous vehicles, you just talk about in the industry period, we bring a different perspective. We bring, we're problem solvers. We think about issues sometimes that other people don't think about, the compassion, the empathy. As a caregiver to my husband, as we're talking about autonomous vehicles, making sure that the vehicle's easy to get in and out of if you're disabled or older. What are the questions that people may have? I think women bring a different perspective to the job, but we also are great engineers. We're great. We have different, I don't want to say different skill sets because men and women each have different skill sets, but I do think that we bring a different perspective that's very needed in the workforce and in the Congress.
Right, absolutely, and I concur with those remarks. Your home state of Michigan has certainly been at the forefront of the work being done in the U.S. on, autonomous vehicle technology. Are there best practices for state and local governments as they begin to allow testing and pilots to take place in their communities?
Well, I think Michigan has been at the forefront of at doing some of these things, and I talked about that in my remarks, but it really enforces quite frankly, that why we need a federal framework for AVs. State and local governments do not have the capacity to set the critical safe standards or develop best practices without the federal government leading the way in AV. So I would recommend that any state or local government looking to expand AV testing work closely with the Department of Transportation while Congress is establishing this framework that hopefully we will get done this Congress.
I can say that the industry has been very thankful that you've stayed engaged on this important topic. Have you discussed AV technology in particular with the new administration, and can you share with us their perspectives at all?
I am, this is one subject that I say to everybody when we talk about an infrastructure bill. I've gone to my leadership, I've gone to the leadership of the committee, and I've said, we're behind. We are, if we don't deal with this, we are leaving ourselves technologically aged. We are not going to be leading the mobility transformation. And Frank Pallone and Jan, now Jan's got concerns, but she's talking to me, and Frank promised me that the chair of the committee that we would move it. And I've said to the administration, and I've said to Pete Buttigieg, the Secretary of Transportation, a year ago, we have to make sure we're staying at the forefront of innovation. And that means we've got to move legislation like this. And I didn't know he was going to be Secretary of Transportation when I had that conversation. And Steve, some of the senior people at the White House are tired of hearing me talk about it. So yes, I talk about it with everybody. It's just there are many things we need to be talking about the industry right now, to keep it at the forefront of innovation and technology. This is one of them.
And thank you again for the work that you're doing and for taking the time to be with us today. We know you have important work to do on the Hill, and we just wish you well. Thank you, Congresswoman.
Well, I love being with everybody. I wish it wasn't the same day as the Facebook, Google, Twitter hearing, which is interesting to everybody, but I love being with you, and we got to keep being women who disrupt. I love disruptive women. So thank you, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.